would like to read. I want to introduce you to Prayaag Akbar. He was a journalist and then he transitioned to being an author. And it was a very good transition, I feel. And as we speak, you will understand why I genuinely believe that this transition was not a loss for journalism, but a great advantage for literature. And his book, Mother India, it is his second book. It has got a lot of very good reviews. One of the most interesting things about this book is that Prayaag uses contemporary changing India as his backdrop. We will discuss more about how this backdrop is also like the characters in the book. There is so much richness to these themes that keep recurring in this novel. So Prayaag, welcome. And welcome to Calicut, to the Kerala Literature Festival. We're very happy to see you. I know it's hot for you.
Hello. Thank you so much, Anita. It's a real honor to be on stage with you. I know I've been watching you on television. I've been seeing your work for decades now, and you've been an inspiration since I was a kid. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm looking forward to the session.
You watched me as a kid. Ancient I am. Okay.
That's not what I meant.
Okay. But so how many of you here have managed to read the book? Oh, great. Okay. Not bad. Because I also just got it, just in time for this session. So we will talk a little bit about the book because I would like to involve all of y'all over here so that we can have a good discussion later on. So Prayaag, I'd like to start by asking if you could just give us briefly the plot of the novel. We will come to the characters and the backdrop later, but just the broad outlines of the plot, if you could say, that would be great.
Sure. So Mother India is a book it's a novel that's set in Delhi, New Delhi, the capital. And it's set in a very small part of Delhi called Mahipalpur. It's a kind of what we call an urban village in Delhi. There are these zones that the government kind of ignores. They're not required to do anything there. And so they've grown in this kind of haphazard way. You know about these, Khidki Gaon. There's a lot of these, what we call gaons in the middle of Delhi, which is a, bustling metropolis. And so I was always fascinated by these areas that are kind of forgotten little sections within our city, within this great city. And it's about a young man who works he works for a YouTuber. He works for a YouTuber named Kashyap, who runs a show called Kashyap Ji Ka Right Arm Fast. He's a kind of right-wing commentator on the news. So whenever something comes up, he creates his little spiel about it, and an issue comes up, and Mayank performs a kind of supporting role for him. He collects images, he collects videos, he collects screenshots. He does all the grunt work that goes into these videos. He and his colleague Sushil, that goes into Kashyap's video. So Mayank is one character, and the other principal character is Nisha, who is she's actually a migrant to Delhi. She comes from the hills. She comes from the foothills of the Himalayas, and she comes in to. She works at a mall. She works at a chocolatier, a Japanese chocolatier in the malls, and the story actually deals with how their lives intersect. They come into contact in a pretty unusual way, I'd say. Mayank uses Nisha is an attractive woman, and he uses her photograph to create a video meme, kind of video of Bharat Mata. And this is actually increasingly a reality. All our lives are being kind of co-opted into this great AI race. But when I started writing the story, this was the kind of my starting point of the story was, one of the starting points was, there was this kind of her image had been taken from her face had been taken from her. And I was interested in this contemporary world, what that means. And so I started exploring how their lives come together and come apart. They don't act, well, I won't tell you.
Okay, you can't tell too much of the story because that's not done, right? But we'll just go to so this is broadly the plot. Then comes the characters, which you briefly mentioned. So unlike the snobbish world of the Delhi elite, his characters are migrants from the outskirts of Delhi, the bad outskirts of Delhi, or the backward parts of the hills of Uttar Pradesh. They are migrants, but they are different from the migrants of earlier generations who were kind of semi-educated. These are educated, they're upwardly mobile, they're aspirational, but at the same time, remember, they are not from the typical fancy Delhi society. I don't know how many of you have lived in Delhi. Delhi is so snobbish. The first thing that somebody meets you, they'll ask you, what's your name? Where do you live? Because where do you live tells them what kind of social or economic class you belong to, and therefore whether you're worth talking to or not. So it is that kind of a snobbish society that pretty much people are used to, but here you bring into contact the reader with these people who are actually the face of New India.
Thank you, thanks. That was really the intention behind the novel. I wanted to write about this new generation, people who are turning 20, 21, 22 at this time, who have to deal with, I think, the changing economy. Technology is changing so much about how we interact with each other, how we interact with our bosses, how we work and I wanted to look at that, and I wanted to look at how a young person would respond to this. And the truth is that there's a lot of talk about economic development. There's a lot of talk about sort of booming India, but for young people, jobs are still very hard to get. I see that. I teach at a university, and I see how hard it is for young writers to get. When we were young and you wanted to be a writer, you kind of looked for a job in journalism, or you looked for a job in some kind of writing, and you managed to find something. And now it's so difficult because the media has been fractured, everything has been sort of upturned. And I was very interested in trying to capture that kind of lack of opportunity, even amidst this very consumption-heavy society. So Nisha works in this mall, and she's the sort of Japanese chocolate, if you can think about it. It's like a very high-end kind of thing. The chocolate is a very intimate, almost. It's a very personal thing. It's meant to be cheap and accessible, but now we have this very high-end kind of chocolate being sold and confectionery being sold, and I was really curious about that because that's still a new thing in India. It's not like abroad, and people are spending crazy amounts of money on things like this, and it's a different kind of consumption than say buying a car or buying a house. It's completely it's transitory. You're having it and it's gone, and but still spending a lot of money, and I think it's a sign of our economy kind of really booming. But then counterposed to that is Nisha's own experience of having to move to Delhi, and which is a hard city to live in for a young woman or a young man. And actually, this is very much a reality of India now. Is the number of people who move to our cities for jobs and leave behind families and leave behind homes, and of course this has always happened. But I think now you have a real ecosystems in support of that, and Nisha's part of one. She's in a PG in Mahipalpur, and she lives with a few girls and that kind of thing. So this is the kind of world I wanted to write about. I'm kind of sick of writing about rich people, I suppose.
Yeah, but you are part of Delhi elite. So, and yet your descriptions of these neighborhoods are very realistic, very knowledgeable, very accurate. So, did you do some kind of research on this? Like, you don't belong to that. So, how did you do it so right?
Well, I did a lot of research. Definitely, it took me a long time to write the book. So I spent a lot of time. I spent some time in Mahipatpur itself. I was also really interested in how it's transformed. It's I think we see this all ourselves now, but our cities change so fast now, especially with they're kind of layers upon layers being built into each other. So this place like Mahipatpur. If any of you are familiar with Delhi, it's right on the edge of the city, and it's where back in the day when I went to school very close to it, and I would drive through it to get home and to get to school.
He was not driving through that. His driver took him, right?
Yeah, that's true. Well, our carpool took us. I was in a carpool.
You thought of this.
Yeah. And so while we were going through this kind of village, I would notice that at that time, it really was this kind of dusty, in the 90s this is, it was this dusty kind of village shops, you'd see these village shops and I could stop there and buy a packet of chips or something like that after school and pay the shopkeeper at the end of the week. It was all very organic and sort of, still had something of the village in it. And then by the time I was graduated from school, it had become something different. It had become outlet malls. And then the airport came up and it had become, the backpackers places opened up and massage parlors opened up and it became a little seedy. And so you had all these different things happening in this community, which was actually one of the oldest communities in Delhi. It's, it's named after one of the first kings of Delhi, Mahipal. He's this Jat king from 1000 AD. And so these are histories that are kind of forgotten. We think of Delhi as a city built by the Lodhis and built by the Mughals and things like that. But there's a very ancient history also, and there's even this medieval history, pre-medieval history that sometimes gets forgotten. And and the communities that are still living there. It's kind of amazing that 1,000 years later, the Jat community still lives in that place. And so. For me, this was a very rich fabric to explore, and instead of looking at it in this kind of top-down way or like kind of an anthropological way or sociological way, I kind of wanted to really think about what it was like for someone who was born in, say, 2000 or 2002. And then, I started with him being born in 2000, but it took me so long to finish the novel that I had to shift it to 2002 because I kept going in wrong directions. But in 2002, so he kind of sees this transformation of his home in various ways, but not transforming for his own needs or the needs of his family or the needs of his community, but transforming for the needs of the city. So you suddenly have these roads going through your village, and you have flyovers coming over your village, and you have these big BMWs riding through, and it's shocking. It must have been. And I spoke to people who went through that and who witnessed it and were part of it. And
we are at a literature festival, and I think one of the most important things for books to do is to kind of paint the picture of whatever it is, in this case, changing India. Now, as journalists, we do it all the time, but I think the role of literature is to present characters who are embedded in our mind, scenes that are embedded in our mind. So there is a sense of enduring images, which is what you do very well. And I'm so happy that you are here with us today at this Kerala Literature Festival, because this, I think, you have made a wonderful contribution to literature itself.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
No, that's about the end of the praise, huh? No. One of the other things, what you've done actually is also to resurrect the unfashionable. These are all not fashionable people, yet they have a beating heart, they have, pangs of fear, they have all kinds of things. This is what immortalizes this changing face of India.
Are they not fashionable? I didn't realize that because
They're unfashionable. Are they fashionable? I don't know.
no, because if you meet a young person now, as I do often in college and all, I'm always struck by how well presented. You know, they all know how to dress.
Yeah,
and
dressing and yes, Nisha wears nice sandals and stuff like that.
I mean, at that age, I knew nothing about clothes. I did nothing about how to present myself. I'm actually quite amazed by how tuned in they are to all of those things that we did that with. So this new generation I find fascinating for many reasons.
That's good.
One thing is that they grew up inside the internet. I grew up, I was in school in the 90s, and so I was kind of, the internet kind of popped up while I was maybe 10 years old or something like that. But these people were born inside, and not even born inside the internet, but born inside social media. They have this kind of visceral experience of it, and they know it from the ground up. And Mayank's life has taken some unusual turns as a kid, also because of social media. So
I want to talk about some of the themes that keep recurring. For instance, like Hindu nationalism, social media, corruption. So let's start with Hindu nationalism. It's there as a thread throughout your book. Why was Hindu nationalism important for you as a writer?
Well, I'm writing about India today, and it seems important to India today as an ideology. It would be, I think, especially because my novel is political, I think it would be very strange to ignore it completely. I'm interested in the ideology. I'm interested in the people who propound that ideology. I come from a minority, I'm a Muslim man, and so I was always tuned into it, even as a child. And I feel that, that it's an ideology that kind of premises itself on separation. And, so in that sense, it's antithetical to, an idea of a nation, an idea of a unitary nation, as opposed to a nation where one community has all the power and things like that. So these are things that really fascinate me on an intellectual level and on a personal level. So I think that's why my novels tend to look at Hindu nationalism. I've kind of promised myself and my wife that I won't do it again, that I'm going to try and write about something else. But these guys keep doing crazy things, and so I have to keep writing about them.
It's very interesting that you talked about it as in terms of separation. In many ways, when you look at Delhi, Lutyens' Delhi, the Delhi elite, that was also the politics of exclusion, because this was a society that lived unto itself and nobody could come inside, nobody was allowed. That's why Narendra Modi talks about this, and a lot of the others feel this exclusion. I have to mention this one incident that, I covered Babri Masjid, the destruction of Babri Masjid, and it was all done by Shiv Sainiks. So after the whole thing was over, I went down to the Bombay slums to talk to these Shiv Sainiks to find out why did they do something. They were so full of hatred against Muslims, going on about Hindutva, and I just couldn't understand, because I come from a certain background of Nehruvian secularism, so I couldn't understand this. I went there and I discovered that it is a politics of separatism, of separation, of exclusion that they experienced, because they were migrants, they left their home, they were uprooted from their village, but they never found acceptance or inclusion in Mumbai. So therefore they were just left high and dry, more and more resentment built up. Finally what happened was that they found a home, so to speak, a political home in Shiv Sena, with the Shiv Sena. And that's how they all, they developed a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. And so now what happens is, when these people found themselves excluded in the earlier regime, they now become mirror images of that and exclude others. But there has been a history of exclusion, so to speak.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't pretend that India was like this, egalitarian or perfect society before this government came into power or anything like that. There were so many avenues of exclusion. I mean, Narendra Modi came into power talking about busting up the Latins elite. Like that was his main thing. On social media, that's all you would hear. Latins, we're going after the Latins. It was a big thing on Twitter and things like that. Latins, Latins. And actually, the really amusing thing is that how quickly the BJP actually, the government and the people in the government kind of have taken over Latins. They've not changed anything. They've just taken over the houses in many ways, and sort of removing the older people in there. And it's natural, I suppose. This is how power works. But it is. I mean, there's a lot to be said for even the fact that Hindu nationalism speaks to so many people in the country. It's important to try and understand it. And I wanted to write about Mayank. Mayank works for this right-wing YouTuber. He has a kind of Hindu nationalist politics, though he's not. He's not. I mean, I'd like to think of him as not a bhakt, but rather like maybe a half bhakt. And so he's figuring himself out, and he's figuring out his politics, and he's drawn to it, and I wanted to understand what draws people to it. I started writing the book in 2019 or maybe 2020. It was just after Modi had that huge verdict, and the first term was not the most successful term. 2000, he had demonetization, and there was a couple of economic hardships and things like that. And it was really interesting to me, the mandate that he got, which was mostly young people. It was a huge mandate of young people, and which no one was kind of expecting, and the size of the mandate. And for me, that really said something for how he's able to create a connection with people who are aspirational, who want to better their lives and better their families' lives. And so that's why I wanted to write about Mayank from a position of sympathy, and from a position of understanding that anyone can be drawn to a politics of triumphalism. Like we're all kind of we can all become victim to it. And so I mean, I can see a lot of myself in Mayank also.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really very identifiable. Let's come to social media. It's throughout the social media aspect is there, because your hero is a social media entrepreneur. Everything goes in this world of social media. So from crime to celebrity, it's a multiverse in itself.
So you mean, what do you mean by crime?
Crime. I mean, there's crime, identity theft. That's crime.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a reflection of the world, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, now you see it's how clearly it's being weaponized. I mean, just if you think about, not to bring in the Americans or Elon Musk into every conversation, but if you just think about how when Elon Musk bought Twitter, he was, everyone was laughing at him for spending 44 billion or whatever, and then the value crashed and all sorts of things. But now he's sitting, he's the right-hand man of the US president, of the most powerful man in the world. So, he's laughing right back at you. So, the fact is that these things are corruptible, just as the world is corruptible, as people are corruptible. And the canny politicians, the really smart ones, like Narendra Modi, realized that very early on. They realized what an audience they could find here, and they utilized it. I feel like the more traditional, the Congress and other a lot of parties really missed that trick. They didn't know how to do it, and they're trying to do it now, but they're not doing it as well.
You're also very insightful. So there are these anecdotes that are interesting and very absorbing, but there are also comments that are very perceptive. So for instance, you would talk about how the internet, there are so many players and, very strong and big players. And your line was something to the effect that what matters is not what he says. What matters is not what he's trying to say. What matters is how we interpret what he says and how we then relate that to communicate to our followers in a way so that they can click. Now that in a sentence sums up the business model.
Thank you. That was actually something I realized again on Twitter. which was that everyone kind of, it doesn't matter like what, everyone has their own kind of, every one of these producers or creators has their own audience that they're talking to. And I realized this years ago when there was this blogger who had a big following. He was one of the early Hindutva bloggers, and he was criticizing Ram Guha for something. He was just
Ramchandra Guha.
Ramchandra Guha, yes. And I was kind of reading this, and I made a comment back. I was like, only on Twitter will you find a blogger making fun of Ramchandra Guha or something like that. And I immediately got attacked by all his followers because they were like, oh, this is the elitist Delhi media, that kind of things, talking and all of that. And I was like, no, I'm talking about Ram Guha. He's like a very, very established historian. He's done all this work. I didn't mean to make a sort of ideological comparison, but I was just actually talking in terms of the work they've done. And but for this man's audience, for this young man's audience, Ram Guha meant nothing, and he meant, what this person's interpretation of what Ram Guha was saying was everything. That was what was crucial. And so I realized, what Kashyap says is, we're the ones with the audience. So, it doesn't matter what this guy is saying. It doesn't matter what the JNU leader, the student union leader is saying. It matters how we interpret what he's saying, because that's the crucial thing.
That's really perceptive, because that's exactly what it is. And you had another very perceptive comment, which was to make an impact on the internet, you don't need ideas, you need enemies. And that explains the polarization, the hate, and all the rest of it. And that is, again, a very, short sentence, a very, very perceptive analysis.
Thank you so much. Do you agree with that? I really think that's true. Yeah.
I think it is completely true.
You see all the people who get these huge followings, and they're all like kind of squabbling with each other, or challenging each other to fights. It's like Musk versus Zuckerberg. That's what thrills us as an audience, as a collective audience.
Yeah.
We like that kind of personality clashes, and we like that kind of, I'm as guilty as anyone else, of enjoying the thrill of seeing two people you don't know just going at it. And I remember, like, back in the day, seeing Barkhada get, and watching how she would fight back and all of that. It's kind of like it provides a sort of prurient thrill. You're kind of enjoying it and watching
entertainment.
It's entertainment. Yeah, it's like gladiatorial.
Gladiatorial, exactly. So I just want to take like a 5-minute break from just our exchange and throw open the floor to take some questions for Prayaag. How about the ones who read the book?
There was someone.
Yeah, there were a couple of them. Any questions? Okay, then we will. Okay, yes, please go ahead.
You have mentioned about this ideological conflicts and separatism. This separatism and that as a trend in India. How do you rate it when compared with the Islamic nations, their identity politics?
Which, I'm sorry.
The Islamic nations on our west, even now regarding the east also, how do you compare it with the Indian politics?
He's
an author, so it's not a journalist or a scientist, but your
question was, how do I compare Islamic nationalism with Hindu nationalism? Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. It's a great. It's something really worth exploring. I think that because, in many ways, Hindu nationalism is following Islamic nationalism. It's like 10 years behind or 15 years behind in pushing. Because countries like Pakistan or Iran went through these processes of radicalization much before India has, and in terms of in Pakistan they started targeting minorities, calling people non-Muslims, like the Wahhabis and all of that, and the Ismailis. They were literally targeting communities within the kind of. Pakistan was a country created for Muslims, and they started finding, kind of heretics within the Muslim community. They didn't even need non-Muslims. They were so because this kind of politics requires enemies, I feel. This real right-wing kind of, really kind of right-wing politics, which it requires an element of always needing an enemy. Sorry?
Jinnah did not want it, he said.
Jinnah did not want what?
Yeah.
Pakistan? No.
Yeah.
It's an Islamic country.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there were many missteps over there, I think. And what's interesting is that even though we have that example right next to us, and we see what a shambles that country is in many ways. It was first a social kind of mess, and now it's an economic mess too. And I feel that we should be very, at least very. I mean, our economy is doing very well, and seems to be. But I worry about our social fabric and things like that. That's what I would say.
So before we move to the next segment, I just wanted to ask the audience, how many of you here are writers or would like to write? See, quite a few. So I want to focus on that a little bit. I'm going to ask Prayaag to read something from his book, because then I want to talk a bit about writing.
It's my favorite topic. Okay, so I'll read just the starting of the book. It's when Mayank comes across. He's been tasked by his boss to find an image of Bharat Mata, Mother India. Bharat Mata is a very important symbol of our nationalism. It's a kind of colonial image that that now increasingly has become an image of right-wing politics also. But it started off as a very in the sort of early 1900s as a very positive symbol of nationalism. And Mayank has been asked to find a girl's face because the AI keeps messing up the image of Bharat Mata. So he's been asked to find a photo of a girl who might suit. And obviously Bharat Mata must be an attractive woman and all of that. So he's looking for the right photo. Mayank was not prone to falling in love. He liked to avoid such distractions. As he assured all who happened on his Twitter bio, appended most recently with 3 tricolor and 1 temple emoji, it was his nation he loved first. How he loved his country. When the anthem sounded before a World Cup game against the great enemy and the handsome old flag began to flutter and flick, he'd feel a sure weight in his throat, as if pride had stopped his power to speak, and he'd have to fight back the ready drop that threatened to form at his eye. Yet here was today, this instant, a moment that seemed to pulse with the unmistakable message that he'd fallen feet first. The girl had a faraway look in her pale green eyes, the dupatta demure around her head, an enduring mole, a light brown diamond on her left cheekbone. Strung around her as a canopy were hundreds of small and large metal bells, darkened by age, and swatches of thin red cloth with tasseled gold borders. The photograph had been taken at the Golu Devta temple. But where on earth was Gora Khal? Her bio gave little information save her age, 23, and sign, Libra, the scales of justice rendered in a geometric symbol that Mayank remembered faintly from school and now looked up, falling briefly into a wiki hole explaining Euclidean equipollence. Once he emerged, confused and mildly regretful, he watched the first video Nisha had posted, set to a soft, rhythmic peal, a slow-motion clip shot from behind of her climbing the temple steps. He moved to the other video, self-recorded. In the thumbnail, Nisha was standing in front of a small, rough idol. The video began with a close-up, an awkward face, a fleeting moa that made his heart jump, and then she forgot the nervous start, speaking at a respectful whisper about the importance of this god. Jai Nyaya Devta, she intoned, 4 elegant fingertips placed delicately upon her sternum, and in her low, throaty voice, Mayank felt the connection burn afresh.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
just to give you guys a little context, when I was writing this, at first, when I started out, I had them kind of meeting in a metro station. And I think it was during the pandemic, so when we all got isolated and locked in, and I realized, actually, social media is where people fall in love now. You see someone's photo or something like that, and you build these abiding passions. And I talk to my students about it. And actually, like it happens to us. We see a photo, even happily married people, like, and you just, you suddenly find someone attractive, and it's a new reality. I would say about how people fall in love now, and obviously it's not love in the sense of the classic sense of the word. It's just a kind of momentary interest, and this is what I was trying to write about.
The great thing about books is that, different people like different things. I would not have chosen that one. I would have chosen something else. But that's always how it is. That's the great part of it. I wanted to talk about writing because this is a short book. It's a very easy read. It's a very beautiful read. And the writing itself is excellent because it is short sentences, simple, to the point, and it is very relevant. But at the same time, it is this whole concept of less is more. You don't have to elaborate how the person is thinking, so on and so forth. A throwaway sentence is enough, and then you start thinking the rest. And that's what good literature is about. And I just wanted to focus a little bit on the writing because I think it's a great education for those who want to write, who are writing, and for people like my husband who only writes memos. But it's also really something to understand in terms of being the Hemingway. Those days are really gone when we could appreciate literature with all those dense, long, Joseph Conrad style of sentences that run for pages because people are used to instant stuff. And Hemingway is the best lead on this. And Prayaag, you've done a great job in doing this. So this style, how did you craft it? How did you go about writing this way?
Well, actually, Hemingway is a great person to learn from. I think there are writers I really admire, and which is not to say I don't like Jane Austen. I'm a huge fan of hers. Also, she writes the long sentences you were talking about.
But if you write like that, you won't get many readers today.
Exactly. I mean, the world has changed. It's impossible to get that kind of engagement, to ask that kind of engagement of your readers. And so, I mean, I'm always wary now at how easy it is to put down a book. Because I face it myself. My son comes into the room, something's on television, a notification, the biggest one, and you put down the book, and that whole. You're not reading anymore. You're doing something else, and it's so easy. We're in an age of distraction, and a book is something that asks something more of us. It asks time and interest and attention, and so I think that one way to keep readers' interest is to write at a quick pace, at a quick clip. And honestly, people like Hemingway were doing it a long time ago,
Yes.
well before the internet, and I can't even think of who else I've been inspired by, but there are many, many writers, including Ishiguro. He's a big hero of mine, and Kutsi. There's all these guys. And
I was just reading the other day that there was a survey done in the United States, and English literature students are not willing to read the old classics that we all grew up reading. They're not prepared to read George Eliot and D.H. Lawrence. They want short, punchy. So that's the way of the world. We just have to adapt to it. Now, you teach creative writing. My question is, can creative writing be taught?
So I had a student, the first year that I taught it, this is the first year I'm teaching the course, and now the university I teach is kind of one of these liberal arts universities, so it's very kind of, it's American in its ethos, and almost like, it's like the liberal arts universities. So student feedback is a very important thing. And they gave us this, they gave the students this questionnaire to fill out, and midway through the term. And so I got the feedback. It goes to the sort of central office, and then they send it to you towards the end of term. And I was reading it, and one student said the same thing. I only took this course to prove that creative writing cannot be taught. And and I knew immediately who she was, because she was this big David Foster Wallace fan, and and she was the best writer in the class actually. And so I don't know if I was able to teach her, but I think my job as a teacher of creative writing is to, I think, expose them to good reading, just to good literature, to try and show them the things that have worked for me, and to try and show, to really, because the things that are important to me. I think what I think of as important as a writer, it's all very personal, and it's all anyone else would teach that course in a different way. But I can only sort of give them the sum of my experience, I suppose.
Yeah, it's another quality that I find in your writing is that as a writer, you're sensitive, but there is no melodrama. So there is, a scene in which Mayank, the hero, his father, during his childhood, his father dies in an accident, his mother is humiliated, and there is just one throwaway sentence. It was so beautiful, and it was Mayank, in his failure to protect his mother, he did not have the time to grieve for his father. Just that one sentence showed the complexity of that character. You don't have to go into paragraphs and paragraphs if you can be sharp in your own head as to what you want to communicate.
Thank you so much. I mean, that sentence is one. Actually, that whole sequence, that passage was one of my favorites in the book, because
I thought you would read that.
the problem is it's very long. So I tried to at one other festival and it didn't really work. So yeah, it's. I think that one actually carried a lot of stuff that I was thinking about at that time when I was writing it, and I think what I liked about that passage is it's set in the Delhi metro, and so he's sort of going through Delhi and he's looking at Delhi, and actually what he's thinking about is his own turmoil, his own, where his life has gone and his past, and the things that he's sad about, and I think that's really how we experience, when we're going through moments of turmoil. There's this external world, but it's the interior voice is so loud, and it overwhelms everything actually, and that's what I was trying to capture.
No, it's again beautifully written, and a good book is all about good writing. It is about the characters. It is about the plot. It is about the backdrop. But literature is also about when a book opens up your mind in unpredictable ways and then offers insights and perspectives which you hadn't, fully realized sometimes, or sometimes it is there in the bottom of your mind. And you do that. You have all through the book, I found there were little gems that was just one sentence. So sometimes just a phrase which made you think. So for instance, you had one which was, it was just a throwaway sentence about the limitless consequences of little actions. Just think about it, the limitless consequences of little actions. Every day we go about our business, doing all kinds of things, saying all kinds of things, not knowing sometimes that the one thing that we said or the one thing that we did has huge consequences 5 years down the line. I mean, it's, for example, when President Obama had this White House dinner and he insulted Donald Trump. And then everybody laughed. Donald Trump was fuming. He was mad at what happened. And who knows, it lit that flame of vengeance in the man, and look where he is today. So just a bit of teasing, lighthearted, poking fun, and the limitless consequences of small actions, little actions.
That's a great
So I would like you to, just something like that. It's, that's what this these insights are about. It's about psychology, it is about philosophy, it is about politics, but something like this, which kind of, embeds in your mind.
Absolutely. I think that was, that's really the best example. Actually, I was, they say that about Musk too. He was rejected from some nightclub in Germany, and that's when he started going right wing, Berghain or something like that. So it's
rejected. Hitler was rejected from the art class.
Yeah, so that's the comparison. Elon Musk apparently also, but. This is the I think that's very true. But how we don't realize sometimes what we're doing to other people.
Yeah.
And Obama, the most lovable sort of figure of global politics in the last 20 years. Look at what he wrought upon us all.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing is doubt. I think, Indians to a great extent are like the Americans, where doubt is often seen as something bad or weak or indecisive, so it's not a good quality to have. It's like in Kerala, if you ask anybody, how do you go to that hotel? With great confidence, he'll say it this way, and it's exact opposite way. No problem. That's our nature, I guess. But again, you have your hero who has doubts. He says all his life he was sure, he was craving for the same thing, but now he's not so sure. So doubt is something that I think is underrated, in that doubt comes from deep thinking, and it can offer course corrections, it can offer many things. So it was very nice to see something like that in your book.
Thank you. This was, first of all, I really want to thank you for reading the book with so much care.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
It's such a...
and I remember a few things, I don't remember anything else.
No, it's very gratifying. It's really why you do this. And so I think Mayank also, he comes from, a lot of people who are familiar with Delhi and the social aspects of Delhi have talked to me about this or commented about this, because he comes from this Jat community, and which is characterized in popular media and things like that, or social media, as this kind of loud, martial, unthinking race, and for me that's the biggest generalization you could ever get. I grew up very close to one of these communities, and I used to play.
What communities?
The Jat. Because I grew up in Gurgaon, and there's Bijwasa, who is a very, Virender Sehwag was from the neighboring village and things like that, and so Najafgarh, and so you actually see not that, and when I used to play cricket with some of them, and what you see is very thinking individuals. I remember thinking that as a kid, that I had all these ideas about these people, and then these people were very different from me, but also just completely, they had completely well-informed, politics or their own sense of self, everything, and it was really impressive to me to thinking back. I didn't realize it at the time. But now that I think back, I was like, it was my kind of sneering, upper class, whatever attitude towards that. And so, hopefully in the 20 years since, I've been able to look at it from another perspective and think of a person as opposed to the community or whatever, And I really wanted to do that with Mayank. It was very important for me to give him, we all have doubt. It's just that some people are taught to push it down. They're taught to don't allow doubt into your mind because it will weaken you. And the truth is that you're basically shutting the door on something that's bothering you.
Yeah.
And so, for Mayank, it was. I also, it's more interesting to write about characters that are actually
they're much more
interesting and thinking individuals.
More complex, more layered.
Yeah.
I had to discover the value of doubt only after I got married and went to Norway, because I'm a Malayali, so self-confidence comes naturally. I work for American organizations. Always, doubt, that's terrible. You have to know everything is, absolutely certain. And then I go to Norway, where everybody wonders, everybody has doubt, everybody thinks everything that even seems certain, they will always have a doubt or a counter to it. So for instance, our favorite hero now, Obama, when he won the Nobel Prize, it was a Norwegian official who told me, "Oh, wasn't that too soon?" something that the whole world had thought of. So it's something that, but it's once you realize that actually it is not indecisive or weakness, it is a product of deep thinking. And that is invaluable.
Doesn't Norway have like a huge number of philosophers in there?
We have the Norwegian ambassador here, which we can tell us. Yes, I think Norway has a fair number of philosophers, and it is a thinking culture. It is a culture that doubts a lot, and and out of that is born all kinds of creativities. So I want to ask if there are any questions. We are now down to the last few minutes. Okay, we have 2 questions. Let's take 2 questions from there.
Now it's time for audience interaction. If you have any questions, please go ahead, but in a few words.
Yeah. Hi, wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. I'm interested in the process of your writing a novel. How do you develop the plot? Is the plot very clear to you when you start writing, or does it happen in the course of your writing? How do you develop the plot, and how do the characters get developed in your mind? If you could comment on that.
This is like asking for the Coke formula.
In a way, yes, but it would be nice if you can reveal the formula or parts of it.
I actually do this over 3 months with my students, but I'm just joking. So actually, I start my stories both times. The 2 novels I've written, they started with the characters. Usually in fiction, I even tell my students the same thing. It's like, start with a person. Like, don't start with a trajectory. We think of stories as plot. This happens, and this happens, and this happens. But honestly, with fiction, especially like book fiction, we read to get a glimpse of someone else's life. You might, your favorite book, like just think of your favorite novel, and it's very rare to remember exactly what happens to those characters, but you remember what the character made you feel. The best example is Holden Caulfield, Catcher in the Rye. Almost no one remembers his meanderings around New York and what he went, this and that, but everyone remembers that angsty, troubled soul, that being 16 or whatever he was. Yeah, so that is the creation that really sticks with you. And so if you can create a character that is memorable in that way, or in any way, then you're already like streets ahead. You've got a good start, and then the story can kind of follow. If you just imagine, at least that's. There's a writer called Zadie Smith who wrote an essay about it, and she said there are 2 kinds of writers. There's one writer who's the planner, and there's one writer who's a kind of freestylist. Or she used another term. I'm using freestyler, but she said that there's one type of novel who will have everything meticulously planned out before they start writing, and one person who waits for a sentence, and once the sentence comes, the story will come. So there's no one way of doing anything, but I do tell my students, and if you ask me,
so you're in the freestyler camp.
I am. I don't know how to plan a novel at all. I try my best, and it just doesn't work.
Thank you. Can we take the next question? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Revert back to your experience as a teacher of writing, creative writing. What do you see? You've talked a little bit about people, the writing styles changing these days, and brevity being very important. But what do you see in your students? What urges and thoughts and themes keep emerging with your students today? And is there anything you would caution them, or do you caution them about any approach?
Well, I don't caution them about, because it's your story, it's your world. You should be able to write whatever you want to write about. Of course, there are things that work in fiction and things that don't. So if I spot something, I will tell them maybe this is a wrong, a misstep of some sort. But I think, sorry, what is the first part? I forgot. Yeah. So the themes of that is a really interesting part of your question. Well, there's a lot of them seem to have stories about mental health, struggles with mental health, dislocation. I think it's also a function of their age, the 19 and 20, and honestly, even at 42 and 52, you're still writing about those things, your parents and all sorts of things. But like, I do notice a lot of recurring sort of stories about. There was one very interesting story I remember about a ghost story set on a college campus where this girl was kind of haunted by all the eyes on her at all times. It was like this panopticon kind of thing, you know. Or she was convinced that she was being haunted by all the other students, and I felt really bad for her because she was a very lonely kind of person. I mean, you know, isolated, and I could sense the isolation in the story. And but you know, I'm just a writing teacher. I can't, you know. So I was, but you know, for me, it was about helping her get to the end of that story and not trying to like analyze it or anything like that. Just, you know, trying to help her write the story that she wanted to write.
So we have to end very soon. We have to end soon in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to ask the last question. There is an inauguration at 6 o'clock, so I want you to have enough time to get there. So one last question. So Mother India in the 1950s, 60s was Nargis, the actress. And we are not talking of historic, you know, not Bharat Mata, you know, through the centuries, through the millennium. But in the 50s and 60s, Mother India for us was Nargis. Now it's your Mother India that's come, and it's Nisha, social media, identity theft, all kinds of new themes around her. How do you see this evolution?
It's, I think, a reflection of India itself. And, you know, I think one of the things we didn't talk about was the mother figure being so important, you know, the idea of the mother, the idea of the mother of the nation, kind of, you know, how important that is for countries that are forming. When the Nargis movie was made, I seem to remember the farming and things like that, and those were the urgent sort of social media. Those were the considerations at that time, because we were coming from era of famine, and we were coming from, you know, and we were nation building at that time, and now we're engaged in a different kind of nation building. And I suppose stories reflect that time. I've tried to kind of reflect our time now.
Which you've done a really good job, because it is a marvelous little story about modern India, contemporary India. I hope you will get a chance to get hold of a copy and read this. If as a writer or as just a reader, it's a very, very good read to have. It's easy to read, it's quick, but at the same time it's also very profound. And thank you. Absolutely wonderful to have you, Prayaag. I know we are going to see you many more times at Kerala Literature Festival. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. And thank you all. Thanks all for sticking around.